The lesson I'm going to teach you is how to buy rental property as a long-term investment.
Rental property? You want to talk to us about buying rental property? I don't even know what that means.
Rental property is a place you buy that other people live in.
Oh, I still don't understand.
Actually, that sounds super boring, bro.
Well, it is. But no one else is teaching this valuable information. Rental property is one of the best ways to build equity.
Please, what is the equity?
Oh, you want to jump right in? Great. Equity is the amount of a property you truly own. It's the difference between your loan balance and your property's market value. If you sold your property and paid off the bank, the value of your equity is what you'd walk away with. When you build equity, you increase the net value of your asset. One way to do this is by paying off your mortgage.
Whoa! Beastie's right. This sounds super boring.
Yeah! You can't make me build equity!
Those words make me feel weird.
If you will excuse me, I must rest my brain now.
Okay. I thought you guys would like to make a lot of money.
Money?
Why didn't you just say that?
I did. Equity is just another word for money.
Ooh.
It is also another word for the horsies. Nay!
So in this episode of Teen Titans Go, Robin is trying to teach the Titans a little bit about personal finance, and that's what we're going to spend our next couple of classes looking at. When we look at personal finance, it is one of those subjects that so many people need to know about, but not very many are teaching. And I thought it would be good to have that included in this economics class. We're not going to cover everything there is to know about personal finance, but we are going to cover the big main topics. We're going to spend most of today talking about compounding interest and the impact that it will have on you, and how you can use it to your advantage, and how it can be something basically the most nefarious of supervillains wouldn't have come up with. It is something that can certainly help you, and something that can hurt you more than maybe you even know. In fact, when we think about compounding interest, there's this one guy who thought of compounding interest as one of the most intriguing and complex things in the world. Someone you may have heard of. Yes, this is Albert Einstein. And Einstein is known for so many things about involving physics and mathematics, and his E=mc² is something that people just kind of spout off, but they don't really understand all that much. Einstein found compounding interest to be one of the most remarkable things in the world. He called it the eighth wonder of the world and said, "He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it." What I'm hoping is that after our lesson today, you're someone who earns that compounding interest. It is something that if you take advantage of early in your life, it can mean a world of difference later. But if you don't pay attention to it, it can mean that you're in a world of hurt today. So let's take a look at compounding interest, what it means and what makes it so powerful. So what is compounding? Well, compounding is the idea that whenever you put a pile of money in the bank, or even just a couple of dollars in the bank, that money is going to earn interest. And we'll talk about other ways to earn interest, but banks are kind of the one that most people think about. Whenever you put money in a bank and it earns interest, then that interest builds upon itself. So it adds to the original pile of money, and then when you get paid interest again, then that second round of interest is paid on the original pile of money plus the first round of interest. And so money gets reinvested. It becomes part of the principal, and it gets reinvested and reinvested. And so that as the principal amount grows, so you have your original amount that you start with, and then you add a little bit of interest to that. So we take this, we add the interest, and then that pile of money gets just a little bit bigger. So the next time interest is paid on the original pile of money plus this interest. And then the next time interest is paid, we get the original pile of money, or the interest is paid on the original pile of money plus interest 1 and interest 2. So now the interest is being paid on greater and greater and greater amounts. And so over time, we see that pile of money grow. And if you give it enough time, the pile of money can be enormous just because the interest compounds upon itself. So this is great if you're a saver, because over time, it means that your savings accounts can grow to enormous sums if you give it enough time. The growth rate to start with is very small, and you won't see a whole lot of difference, but as the longer that money stays in the bank, that longer that interest is allowed to compound, you'll start to see that pile of money grow slowly, slowly, but then it's going to start to grow more quickly, and then it's going to it can amount to an enormous sum if you're at a fixed interest rate. Unfortunately, this also means that any debt you owe can grow exponentially. That's what Einstein meant when he said, "So he who understands compounding interest earns it, but he who does not understand compounding interest owes it." So that while your savings can grow quickly, and that money is yours, if you have debt, that debt can grow exponentially as well, to the point where it is overwhelming. And you think, I've been paying this debt for years and years and years, and how come it doesn't look like I've paid anything off? That's compounding as well. So why is compounding so powerful? What gives compounding its strength? Well, again, it's this idea that we have interest, and that interest builds upon itself. So if the interest is calculated annually, so that means just every once a year, then a deposit at the end of the first year will increase by the rate of interest. And then the next year, the starting amount is larger because the interest was added to it. Again, here's your pile of money. So at the end of year 1, you have this pile of money plus interest. Interest is paid on that pile of money. So now this, for year 2, becomes the principal. So this is the amount that you have in your bank account at the end of the year. So at the beginning of year 2, the pile of money that you have in your account is now larger. So the interest for year 2 will be paid on your new principal, so that the next year the starting amount is larger. At the end of that second year, the new interest paid is based on the original amount plus the principal. At the end of year 3, the interest paid will be on the new principal plus the new interest. So again, that pile of money, this thing here keeps getting a little bit larger every year, so the interest paid is also going to be a little bit larger. And if you're reinvesting that interest, then your pile of money gets bigger and bigger. So how do we know how things are going to end up? Well, there's an equation we can use to calculate how that interest is compounding and what that means for you at the end of a certain number of years. So here's our equation. And so the principal is the amount that you start with. We have R is the interest rate, and T is the number of time periods over which the compounding occurs. So here's your pile of money. That's your principal. The interest rate is what the bank is paying you as your money stays in the bank, and T is the number of time periods over which the compounding is occurring. So think about this. In order to have a larger new principal, what has to happen to R And what happens to t? If you want a bigger new principal, what would it be in what do you think r and t should be? I mean, not a specific number, but just kind of generally. If you want, again, if you want this to be bigger and you start off with a fixed amount of principal, what do you think should happen to r and t? What do you think needs to happen to r and t, or r or t, for the new principal to be larger? You want these numbers to be big. And the bigger they are, the more new principal you will have. So if the interest rate is, say, 1%, that's not going to change your principal all that much. It'll change it some. But if the interest rate is, say, 10%, now you're multiplying by a bigger number. Additionally, if t is very small, then that exponent, that power, it's not going to have that much power. The smaller the value of t, the less power the compounding will have. But if t is a big number, then that means that there is a big impact of the compounding. And that's why we say you need to start saving early, because that allows the t to be a bigger number. To put this in some kind of a perspective, because I know this, the math can seem a little confusing, let's take a look at a film clip and then apply what has happened in that film clip to this idea of compounding.
Good morning. Or should I say afternoon?
Where am I?
You're in a recovery room in New York City.
Where am I really?
I'm afraid I don't understand.
The game. It's from May 1941. I know because I was there. Now I'm going to ask you again. Where am I?
Captain Rogers.
Who are you?
Captain Rogers, wait! All agents code 13. I repeat, all agents code 13.
Look, I'm sorry about that little show back there, but we thought it best to break it to you slowly.
Break what?
You've been asleep, Cap, for almost 70 years. You gonna be okay?
Yeah, I had a date.
So in that clip from Captain America First Avenger, we see that Captain America has been asleep for 70 years. And that's sad for him. He had a date. And that's not going to happen. But what might have happened while Captain America was asleep, if he had any foresight whatsoever, is that Captain America might have made himself a pretty tidy sum, depending upon how he saved his money, or if he saved his money at all. So let's take a look at how Captain America might have been helped out by this idea of compounding interest over this length of time. To see how Captain America's savings might have grown significantly, we can put some numbers into that equation we just saw, or we could use a kind of a shortcut, a shortcut that will allow us to at least get a feel for what has happened to Cap's savings over time. It's something we call the Rule of 72. The Rule of 72 provides some quick approximation of what is happening with compounding. If you take 72 and divide it by the interest rate, expressed as a whole number, that's going to tell you with a great degree of specificity how long it will take for an amount of money to double. So for example, let's say you have an 8% interest rate. You would then take 72 divided by 8, which gives you 9, and that says if you have an amount of money, say $1,000, in 9 years, as a result of compounding, you will have $2,000. That's the Rule of 72. It tells you how many years it will take for your money to double. Of course, if interest rates are lower, then it's going to take a longer period of time to double. If, say, the interest rate is only 2%, then 72 divided by 2 is 36. That means it takes your money 36 years to double. If the interest rate is higher, say 12%, then 72 divided by 12 is 6. It would only take your 6 years for your money to double. And again, that's the point. The bigger the interest rate, the faster your money grows. And that's just something that the Rule of 72 shows us. So, you should start saving early. The earlier you start saving, the more time your money has to take advantage of compounding interest. Compounding is going to work slowly at first. So if you wait and wait and wait until you start to save, then you're not going to have that time where the growth is happening slowly until later in life. Even if you just save a little bit early, it's going to start to compound, and then it's going to pick up speed, so that over time, your money is doubling, and then it's doubling again, and then it's doubling again. But the third and fourth and fifth time it doubles, it's doubling from a larger amount. The rate of interest matters. It matters significantly. So, one of the things you want to think about when you're saving money is, where am I putting my money? Depending on the tool that Captain America uses, presuming he'd actually save some money, the speed of compounding is going to be very, very different. So let's say that Steve Rogers saves $1,000 in 1943. That's when he, in the Marvel series of movies, that's when his plane crashes and he goes into the ice. And he is frozen. So let's say that right before that happens, he puts $1,000 away. A regular old-fashioned bank account is going to earn him about 2% over that time. So when Captain America is pulled from the ice in 2011, that's when the Captain America movie premiered, then he would have, if we take the principal amount, which is $1,000, and multiply it by 1 plus R. R is the interest rate, and at 2%, that means 0.02. And then he's been in the ice almost 70 years, as Nick Fury tells him. T equals 68. So we put those numbers into our equation, and we will find that Steve has $3,844.25. Again, not too bad, considering he didn't add any money to it. It has increased almost 300%. So that's not terrible, but what if he would have put his money somewhere else? What if instead of putting his money in a bank account, he would have put it in the stock market? Average rate of return from 1943 to 2011 was 7%. Now, you might not think that 7% is all that much bigger than 5%, or than 2%. It's only a 5% difference. But because of compounding, this makes an enormous difference. We put $1,000 into our equation. That's our principal. And we multiply it times 1.07 instead of 1.02 and take that to the 68th power. So again, t is 68. The interest rate is 0.07. So that goes here. And look what we end up with. This is a big, big difference. By putting your money in the bank, he gets $3,800. By putting his money in the market, he gets almost $100,000 without adding anything to the principal because of compounding, and in particular because the interest rate matters. The bigger the interest rate, the more money you end up with at the end of the compounding. There's this comic book character. If you've seen the Deadpool movies, you've probably come across Cable. Cable is this guy who has the ability to time travel, and he understands compounding interest. Being able to time travel affords Cable some significant opportunities. He can find, and he knows because he can travel through time, he can find the vehicle that's going to earn him the highest interest rate. And so he can go back in time and say, I want to put my money here because it's going to get me a really big interest rate. Or he could go back further in time and allow compounding to happen for a longer period of time. In other words, he can increase T. In the first option, he could increase R. He can do this after the fact because he knows what is going to happen. He's a time traveler. So Cable has this opportunity to take advantage of compounding interest. And in one of the Deadpool comics, he actually talks very specifically about this. Cable is talking to some venture capitalists. They're looking for basically for someone to give them money to start their business. And he's got all this money, Cable does, and so he's explaining how it happens. They asked him, how did you get all your money? And he says, well, I go back in time, and after my initial deposit, it's just a matter of letting time do the work. This is the compounding. And when the interest piles up, it doesn't matter when I know money won't be a problem. So basically, he's putting this little amount of money in a bank account. He knows he's got all the time in the world. And so he's been stuck in 2016, and he's getting down to his last millions of all of this money that's been piling up over time. And the venture capitalists, or the inventors, the business owners who want to know how he's made all of his money, they're just baffled by this. They're stunned, and they think, oh my gosh, we have found the ultimate unicorn, the ultimate person who can finance our operations for forever because he has this ability to take advantage of compounding like nobody else. Okay, so that's how compounding works. And what we've been looking at here thus far is how it works in your favor. Before we go and look at how compounding can harm you, let's take a couple of minutes to work through an exercise to see if you really have the basics down here. So we're going to take a look at a number of different superheroes. We're going to give them all $1,000. And we're going to see if you can figure out how much money they will have at the end of a certain period of time based upon when they premiered. When was their first issue out? So let's take a look at a table of data. You know the equation. Everybody's going to have the same starting amount, and everybody's going to have the same interest rate. So here we go. Our heroes include Superman, Wonder Woman, Martian Manhunter. We have Spider-Man, Black Panther, Wolverine, Captain Canuck, who's a Canadian superhero. North Star, that's another Canadian. We've got Rocket Raccoon. We've got Deadpool, Blue Beetle, and Ms. Marvel. So all of these heroes have their starting dates, the year they appeared, and they all are given $1,000. Everybody has the same interest rate of 7%. So pick one or two of these and see if you can use the equation that we've just been looking at. So that's the equation that the principal times 1 plus the interest rate taken to the power of t, which is the time it has to compound. See if you can use that equation to figure out how much money each one of these characters would have in the present if they started with 1,000. In fact, you might want to pause the video at this point, work through the calculations on one or two or three of these, and then I'll show you the answers here in just a minute. Okay, so here we are. We're using 2020 as our year. So what you need to do is figure out how many years they have to compound. If you take 2020 minus 1938, which was Superman, that's how you get the 82 years. If you have chosen, say, Rocket Raccoon, notice Rocket comes along in 1982, and so if we take 2020 minus 1982, we only have 38 years. So Rocket has far fewer years for his interest to compound. That is the value of t, whatever you have in this years column. The interest rate is r. And so if you look at these characters and you see how much time they have to compound at 7% interest, you see that Superman is by far the richest, but he's had the longest period of time for his for his principal to compound. And then Ms. Marvel, who just came along in 2014, at least the Kamala Khan version of Ms. Marvel, she hasn't had time for her savings to build up all that much. It's the slow period of time for Ms. Marvel's savings, so she only has $1,500. But after 82 years go by, she's going to have as much as Superman. Well, except for Superman's money's going to continue to compound. Superman will be a multi-millionaire when Kamala Khan has the same amount of money as Superman does right now. So this points out a couple things. Well, one really important thing, and that is the longer you put your money in a savings account, the longer you have to save, the more you will end up with at the end of time. And one assumption that we've made, of course, is that you don't add anything to your principal. If you just start with $1,000, but if you keep adding to the principal yourself, then these amounts that you will have at the end of your savings will be even larger because they'll start to compound too. So let's take a quick look to wrap this up at an application of the rule of 72. Remember, the rule of 72 tells us how long it takes income to double. At an interest rate of 7%, we take 72 divided by 7, and that's 10.3 years. 10.3 years for incomes to double. So how many times does Superman's income double? Well, we take 82 years, that's how long it's been since Superman premiered. We divide it by 10.3, and that tells us that Superman's income is doubling almost 8 times since he first premiered. For another character, let's say Deadpool, how many times does Deadpool's income double? Well, Deadpool hasn't been around as long. He's only been around 29 years. We take 29 divided by 10.3, and Deadpool's income only doubles 2.8 times. That means that because Deadpool hasn't been around as long, because there are fewer years in the value of T, his income doesn't have as much time to double. Whereas Superman's doubles and doubles and doubles and doubles again, it grows exponentially, and Deadpool's will too, but because he essentially started saving later than Superman, his income doesn't double as often, so he doesn't have as much income at the end of the compounding period. So that's what happens when compounding interest works in your favor. It can be an enormous advantage to you. You put money in a savings account, you add to it periodically. It doesn't even have to be all that much. But if you give that savings enough time to compound, you can be sitting on a pretty significant sum of money when it's time to retire. But what happens when it works in reverse? What happens when you're not getting the benefit of compounding, rather you're bearing the burden of compounding? We need to pay attention to that too, so that we don't end up repaying incredibly large sums of money, much greater than you borrowed in the first place. When it comes to paying off debt, the rule of 72 applies here as well. The rule of 72 and this idea of compounding interest applies to all debt, whether it's student loan debt, credit card debt, your mortgage, your house, your car payment, anything you owe. If you have an interest rate associated with it, you're going to end up paying more than you borrowed. And the longer you take to pay that off, or the higher the interest rate, the more interest you pay. And basically, the more of your money you're giving to somebody else. So the rule about debt, not the rule, but the thing you want to keep in mind about debt is that the faster you pay it off, the less you will pay overall. And this can save you hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands or perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. If you have to borrow money, pay it off as fast as you can. Otherwise, you're going to be paying the interest that you otherwise would be earning. Let's say that you want to, you're going to buy something relatively cheap. Let's say it's a music download from one of your favorite artists. So you buy this music download and you pay, let's just say, $10.50 for it. And you put that on your credit card because it's an online purchase and that's how you have to go about making that purchase. So you get your credit card statement and this is the only thing on it, and it says minimum payment $2. So you think to yourself, well, if that's all I have to pay, that's all I'm going to pay. And so you make that $2 payment, just the minimum. And you would think that after you make that $2 payment, that your balance, the amount that you still owe, would equal $8.50. You take the $10.50 minus the 2, that seems like that makes all the sense in the world. But you would be wrong. That's not going to be your balance. So the way the credit card works is that if you don't pay the full balance off at the end of the month, then you're going to owe the principal plus interest. Now, if you pay $2, that will come off the principal, but the interest will be based upon the full amount that you borrowed. And so if you make that $2 payment on your $10.50 balance, the $2 comes off, but what goes on is interest that you owe for borrowing the money in the first place. So your balance doesn't decrease by $2, it decreases by less than $2 because now you're going to owe interest. And just like when you saved money and the interest compounded, when you owe money, the interest is going to compound. Let's see what that means for you as you're making repayments on this purchase. We're going to assume an interest rate, actually a very low interest rate for credit cards, of 12.99%. So basically that's our value for R, 12.99%. So if you pay the minimum you owe, which is $2, then you're going to have to pay interest now on the amount that you borrowed. But one thing that you may not know about credit cards is that they don't charge interest rate every year. They don't charge interest rates every month. They actually charge interest rates every day. The interest rate is a daily rate. So what happens is every day you're going to pay just a tiny little bit of interest. You're going to take the interest rate and divide it by 365 days in a year. And then we multiply that by your average monthly balance. So whatever you owe on the credit card. So in the example we're looking at here, the amount of money that you will owe for month 1 is the interest rate, 12.99% divided by 365, and multiplied by your average monthly rate. Well, for that first month that you borrowed the money, you owed $10.50. So that's what we're going to use as our average monthly balance. Month 1, we have 0.00036 times $10.50. Remember, $10 is what you borrowed. The daily interest is 0.00036, which is pretty small. So at the end of the month, you're going to owe an extra 11 cents. That's how much interest you are going to owe. Now, you may say to yourself, oh, what's 11 cents? Who even cares? 11 cents is pretty small. That's not that big of a deal. And you would be right. And in fact, if we looked at month 2, it might make you even less likely to worry about interest. Because in month 2, now we still have that 0.00036 times the average monthly balance, which is now your $850. But it's not just $850. It's $850 plus the 11 cents. It's your principal plus interest. And if we take that calculation, our month 2 interest would be, well, actually is 9 cents. 9 cents is not very big. But over 2 months now, you've paid 20 cents in interest, which means it's going to take you longer to pay your bill. Because when you make the minimum payment of $2, well, now you're not down to $6.50 anymore. You never were. You're going to be down to a larger number than that. Now, if we continue to look at this and we continue to look at the compounding of interest over time, if we do this over and over and over and over again until your bill is paid off, just by making the minimum payment, then the total amount of your $10.50 purchase ends up costing you $10.87. In other words, you've paid 37 cents in interest. And you may say to yourself at this point, so what? It's 37 cents. You walk around campus long enough, you'll find 37 cents on the ground. You don't even have to really worry about this, right? Well, let's put this into a little bit more perspective. Let's put this into a little bit more realistic situation. In the real world, In the real world, 12.99% interest, that's actually really low. Hardly anybody gets that interest rate on a credit card. And most people have way more than a $10.50 balance on their credit card. Let's take a look at two different scenarios here. Let's say that you have a more realistic credit card interest rate first. So let's say instead of 12.99%, you have the upper limit in most states of credit card interest, which would be 29.99% interest. That's a really high interest rate. And if that was the interest rate with your principal of $10.50, so your original $10.50 purchase, the amount of interest paid is no longer 37 cents, it is now 89 cents. And you may say, so what? It's only 89 cents. But it's way more than 37 cents, and you are way more likely to have a 29.99% interest rate on your credit card than a 12.99% interest rate. You still may be thinking, well, still, so what? Well, here's the so what. The average balance on a person's credit card in the United States is not $10.50. It's $3,200. That's the average balance. And the minimum payment on an average balance like that, with the average interest rate on a credit card, the average interest rate on a credit card is 25%. The minimum payment is only $98.67. A $98.67 minimum payment. Not so bad. But if that's all you're paying, you're going to be repaying an awful lot of money if all you do is make the minimum payment. If you don't add anything to the balance of that credit card, how long do you think it's going to take to repay that loan? We'll round up the minimum payment to $100 just to make the math easy. You might say, well, $3,200 divided by $100 minimum payment would be 32. So that should mean 32 months, which is 2 years and 8 months. That's how long it should take to pay your credit card bill off. And you would be so very wrong. You could be more wrong, but you're not going to be much more wrong. If you don't add anything to the balance of your credit card, because the interest is compounding, it's going to take you 55 months to repay. This isn't right. It's going to take you 55 months to repay. 55 months is 4.5 years. 4 years, 7 months. And over that time, you're going to repay $5,388. But you only borrowed $3,200, which means you're giving the bank $2,188 in interest. That $2,188, that could have been money you were spending on yourself, helping yourself to deal with scarcity, helping for things around the house. Maybe the car breaks down, maybe the computer stops working, you need a new cell phone. All of that, anything that you needed, you could have bought with that money, but instead, because of compounding interest and because you're only paying the minimum on the credit card, that money's going to the bank. That money's being used to pay interest over 4.5 years. Compounding interest is something that we have to take seriously because of the enormous benefits it can create for us, but also because of the enormous costs it can foist upon us. Compounding interest, it's not something we want to mess around with. It's not something that we want to ignore because we do so at our peril. Albert Einstein was absolutely correct. He who doesn't understand compounding interest pays it, and you can pay it and pay it and pay it. And no matter what your loan is, whether, again, it's a student loan, a credit card, a car payment, a mortgage payment, whatever you're borrowing money for, pay very close attention to how much interest you are paying. Because if you don't, and you just make the minimum payments, you're going to end up really harming yourself. Let me give you one last example of this. Let's think about a mortgage. A mortgage is probably the most amount of money you'll ever borrow in your life. It can be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of borrowing. Even in an era where we have really low interest rates like we do right now, borrowing money comes at a cost. It's an opportunity cost. When you pay interest, it's not just the money that you're losing. Interest entails or incurs lots of opportunity costs. It's the stuff that you can't do for yourself. So the more interest you pay, the bigger the opportunity cost. All right, let's use the illustration of a mortgage once again. And let's say that your mortgage is $215,000. I'm going to use some basic number calculations and some relatively small interest rates to show you how to save, close to $10,000 on your mortgage. Now, doesn't mean that you're going to pay less over time. What it does mean is that you're going to pay a lot less in interest. So let's take a look at a breakdown of a roughly $215,000 mortgage. So essentially, the principal of your loan is $215,000. Let's take a look at a couple of different scenarios with a mortgage of $215,000. In each case, we want to know what the interest rate is. We want to know how much time there is to repay the loan. We want to know what the payment will be. And we want to know how much interest is paid. So in the first scenario, borrowing $215,000, the interest rate is 3.59%. The time to repay that loan is 12 years. And with that situation, the payment is $1,891 and some change. Under that circumstance, the interest paid over the course of this loan will be $47,580.65. $47,000 just in interest on this loan. And remember, 3.59% is a pretty low interest rate, historically speaking. But interest rates have gone down. And so let's say that in our second scenario, we're looking at a change in just the interest rate. So we're going to reduce the interest rate to 3.24%. We're going to leave the time at 12 years. So same amount of time, lower interest rate. And what do we see happen? Well, we see that the payment per month goes down to $1,805. And the amount of interest that you pay is also going to go down. So the interest payment is going to go down to $44,783. So I have this number in green because this is good for you. It means you're saving. So let's add one more row here. Interest saved. In this second scenario, you are saving $2,796 and some change. So that's good for you. By reducing the interest rate, you're reducing how much you owe in interest. And your monthly payment goes down. So that's kind of a win in two senses of the word. But what if instead we reduced the amount of time that you would be paying on this loan? So let's put a third scenario here. We'll keep the interest rate at 3.24%. And instead of paying for 12 years, you changed your payment plan to a 10-year plan. In other words, you're trying to get this loan paid off more quickly. Now that's going to increase your monthly payment, and that may make it a little bit more difficult for you. The monthly payment's going to be $2,099. So basically, from where we started over here, we've increased the payment about $200 a month, which again, that can be pretty hard for some people. But look at what it's going to do to you in terms of how much interest you owe. In this third scenario, the amount of interest you owe is going to be $36,995 and a little bit extra. Which means from the original scenario, by paying a couple $100 more per month and reducing the term, well, basically by reducing the term and having to pay a little bit more, you're going to save yourself $10,585.51. That is an enormous savings. Think about what you could do with $10,585. And the way you get that is to pay for a shorter period of time. Pay a little bit more per month, but pay for a shorter period of time. Now let me give you one last illustration, one last example of what could happen if the interest rate goes down even a little bit more. So I'm going to erase this second scenario here. So we have our first and our third for comparison. Okay, let's say that the interest rate goes down even more to 2.48%. And let's have this, we'll play this out at a 10-year loan rate. So again, we're reducing the interest rate from the first scenario and we're reducing the number of years. That's what we did in this scenario here, and that's what we're doing here. But at that lower interest rate, look at what that does to your payment per month. The payment is $1,970.13. So yes, we do go up from where we started, but only by about $80 a month. And we're like $120 cheaper than we were in scenario 3. So we are increasing the payment, but at that lower interest rate, the increase in the payment doesn't go up by nearly as much, and we're cutting time off of how long you have to pay. And so that reduces the amount of interest paid to $26,415.60. $26,000 is a lot of money. That's how much you are paying for the privilege of borrowing money. But look at how much interest you save over that first scenario. The amount of interest that you're saving is $21,165.05. Lower interest rates help you enormously when you are borrowing money. And if you could save $21,000 by paying a lower interest rate and paying your loan off more quickly, if you can afford to do this, this is a tremendous savings to you. Just think about what you could do with all that money you've saved. So as we wrap up this first bit on personal finance, there's an enormous takeaway here, something to really keep in mind, especially as you graduate and you start having to worry about these big money issues. How am I going to pay back my student loans? How am I going to afford to buy a house or a car? Or what should I do about my credit card bill? As a saver, there are things you can do to make sure that this works out in your favor. So as we wrap up our material, let me just give you some last kind of takeaway tips for borrowers. If you are borrowing money, do what you can to lock in a lower interest rate. And if rates go down, look at refinancing. Make sure you understand all of the costs and fees associated with refinancing. But if the interest rates are going down, that can work in your favor. It can mean you pay a lot less in interest. If you can do this, pay a little bit extra each month on your loans. Don't just pay the minimum. If you just pay the minimum, you're going to owe so much in interest. And make sure that if you do pay a little bit extra, it goes to the principal of the loan. The smaller the principal, the less you pay in interest. Even if it's just $5 extra a month, that can add up over time. Pay attention to your credit score. This is going to help you to get a better rate. And so if you start off with a better rate, it means you're going to start off by paying less interest than other people. And absolutely stay away from payday lenders. Payday lenders have the ability to charge interest rates that would blow your mind. Stay away from payday lenders at all costs. So those last two issues, your credit score and payday lenders, those are things you have an enormous amount of control over. When it comes to your credit score, a credit score is like a letter grade, or actually a number grade, for how credit worthy you are. And the higher your score, the more credit worthy you are, which means you should be able to pay lower interests. You're a better borrowing risk. You're more likely to pay your bills back. So let's just do a real quick look at the credit score and see what you can do to help improve your credit score. There are a number of different companies that put credit scores together, but for the most part, they all do it the same way. Your FICO credit score is broken down into essentially these 5 areas. The most important is your payment history. Have you paid your bills on time? And all you have to do here is make the minimum payment every month. If that's all you do, as we've talked about, though, that's going to cause you a lot more, and it's going to cause you to pay a lot more in interest. But make the payments. Pay your bills on time. Pay your electric bill, pay your medical bills, pay your water bill. Those things all show up on your credit score. If you owe somebody money, it's almost certainly going to be on your credit score. And payment history is the most important thing to maintain a high credit score. Very closely associated to that, though, is what we call the debt burden. This refers to how much money you owe other people, and yet that shows up on your credit score as well. So do you have 6 credit cards all open with balances? That's going to show up, and that's going to hurt your credit score. Get those all paid off. Don't have outstanding credit if you can avoid it. What's your mortgage payment? Are you making, what are your student loan payments? Those are all there. And the more debt you have, the more of a risk you become to someone from whom you want to borrow money. And so they're going to charge you a higher interest rate. How long have you had a credit file? That's actually really important. If you don't have credit right now, if you don't have a credit card, if you don't have any access to credit, you probably should get some. Get a credit card. You don't have to use it. Or if you use it, make sure you only use it for small emergencies and you pay it off right away. The longer you have a credit history, the better it will be for you. What are the types of credit? Are they credit cards? Are they lines of credit? Are they places where you have immediate access to cash? Are they just loans that you have to pay back? Those things matter. And then, has anybody looked at your credit report recently? This can affect your credit score, because if more people are looking at your credit score, if more people have run a credit report on you or checked your credit score, that's a reflection that you're looking for money, and that can be a mark against you. If you need to borrow money for a car, and so they run a credit report on you, that's going to be on your credit report, but not for that long. But if someone's looking at your credit score because you're looking to borrow a car and you're looking to refinance your mortgage, and you just opened 3 new credit card applications and you're looking to buy furniture and there's a credit line there, that's going to set off red flags. But for now, for you, for college students, the most important thing is pay your bills on time. Don't have a huge debt burden relative to your income, and get a credit card. You don't have to use it, but get it so you have that credit history and you're starting to build that credit history. Again, you have control over your credit score, a lot of control, but you have to be responsible with it. And if you do a good job at being responsible with credit, that's going to open doors for you in the future. That's going to allow you to borrow at lower interest rates. The other thing, and the last thing that you have a lot of control over, is whether you go to payday lenders. So let me just give you some of the gory details about payday lenders before we wrap up. Payday lenders, or fast cash lenders, people who promise you cash now. those are people who have the opportunity, and legally they have the right to charge really, really, really high interest rates. And so stay away from these people at all costs. This is a growing industry, but it's an industry that that takes advantage of people who are in bad situations. For example, in Idaho, payday lenders charge an average of 582% interest on loans. That's the average, which means some people pay more. South Dakota, Wisconsin, they allow 574%. And Nevada, Delaware, and Utah allow payday lenders to charge astronomical interest rates, which means even if you're borrowing a very small amount of money from them, you're going to pay back 4 and 5 times as much as you borrowed. Don't do this. And we see other states, Colorado, Oregon, and Maine. They have much lower legal limits, but they're still over 100%. Don't borrow money from payday lenders. It's going to cost you a fortune. So pay off those loans. As we've looked at, the compounding interest is a miracle and a curse. It's great for you if you save, but if you borrow, watch out. Not all loans compound in the same way. Mortgages, student loans, credit cards, they all compound slightly differently. And there are student loan calculators that you can find online to help you understand how much you're going to owe. And there are mortgage calculators and credit card calculators. Take advantage of the resources that the internet provides. Talk to people, talk to your parents, talk to your friends about borrowing money and what the real costs of borrowing money are. There are opportunity costs involved with how much interest you pay. And look around if you need to borrow money. Shop around for the best interest rate. It's almost certain you're going to have to borrow money at some point in your life, and you probably already are just to go to school. But you can save yourselves so much if you pay attention to this basic idea of compounding. And you can save for yourself so much if you start saving early. I know it's not easy to do, especially as college students, but getting those bills paid off quickly, putting money away, no matter how little you think it is, it's going to add up over time, thanks to the miracle of compounding interest.